Hey guys, today we're taking a look at my Duston deck. Now this deck is a very silly deck. It's based on just overloading your opponent's field and then really locking your opponent down and destroying them quickly. This is an OCG deck. I usually don't do OCG decks. This is kind of an exception only because the one card that I want to use to make this deck work is OCG. And it's going to come out in Primal Origin. So, in a couple months, I think in May, I think that's when Primal Origin comes out. You can probably just make this deck. It'll be TCG. So this is just the version I'm using now. That's an OCG, but it'll be TCG anyway, so it's not really a big deal. But don't expect me to make a ton of OCG decks just because of this. So first off, we have 3 White Duston. White Duston is just the normal card for the deck. He can be used for XYZs and things like that. So that's just kind of interesting. He's kind of an exception to a lot of the Dustons. And then the star card that I was talking about, that's OCG, is Starduston. So this card is really crazy. Its stats become 1,000 times the Dustons you use. So it'll become very strong with how you set up the field. And it locks down your opponent. Your opponent can't flip or special summon. Your opponent can't activate set, spell, or traps cards. So they're very, very limited in what you do. But you can't have a big field presence or else you'll lose this card. So the main idea is you lock down your opponent, keep them from activating anything, and then you use Starduston to overload your opponent, which is really, really nice. And then we have House Duston. So House Duston is basically just used to load up the field very quickly. That's what it does. You have to trick your opponent into attacking it or destroying it, or you can just suicide it. So usually you'll suicide it because that's the easiest way to do it. And then the field gets loaded up and you can bring up Starduston and things like that. So yeah, your opponent won't be able to do much, which is very annoying for them. And then the normal color Dustons, blue, green, red, yellow, they all have annoying effects that your opponent will have to deal with. But it's more just the fact that you use all of them to load the field. So I'm not going to go into each of their effects. But the big thing is that you can't use them for any type of summon like XYZs or fusions or things like that. And then Stygian Security, really, really good for this deck, allowing you to search out House Duston very quickly. And your opponent obviously won't want to attack it. So can be very, very good. And then for the spells, we have Magicalized Duston Mop. So it's mostly used as a baiting card because when this card gets destroyed, you can search out, which is really, really bad for your opponent. If you can search out House Duston, they're going to be in a bad situation. So that's one of the things that you're able to do. So you can use its effect to annoy your opponent to keep them from doing things. And then your opponent will want to destroy it anyway, or you can have them destroy it while it's set down. So either way, it works out for you. MST, one of the ways of dealing with back row, which can annoy you at certain times. Hidden Armory to search out. Either you can search out Duston Mop to get your House Duston, or you could search out Opti-Camouflage Armor, which I'll talk about now. You just use that and equip it to Starduston, and you keep your opponent locked down and just keep doing damage to them. With House Duston, if you trigger all the Dustons and you get 4 on the field, Starduston will have 4,000 attack, and you'll beat your opponent in 2 turns. So very, very powerful. And then Dark Hole, one of the things that will annoy you is if your opponent loads their field very early, so you won't be able to swarm them as much, so that can be definitely an annoying thing. Anti-Spell Fragrance, if you have that on top of Starduston, it's pretty much a complete lockdown. Your opponent won't be able to do very much at all. Battle Mania, also very useful in this deck. Once you load your opponent with Dustons, cause them to suicide and cause your opponent to take a lot of damage, which can be really good as well. Fiendish Chain, very important for this deck to deal with effects, one of the ways that will get in the way of what you're trying to do. And Duston Roller, kind of doing the same thing as Duston Mop, also baiting your opponent to search out what you need. So now for the extra deck, not too much to say here. You really shouldn't be using the extra deck really at all. It's just kind of backup. So you really just have all the 1-star XYZs that you'd expect. Slacker Magician, Shamoji, Dullahan, Utopia Roots, the new one, is very useful. Mira, Baby Tiragon, Goldratt, Lionheart, and Galaxy Queen. Again, most of them won't be used, but they're here if you need them to activate some of their useful effects. For the side deck, there's a lot of other tech that you can use for this deck to make it work. Mystic Piper to search out things, Battle Fader, anything like Battle Fader, Swift Scarecrow, Wabaku, anything that stalls can be useful for this deck. Goblin King is one of the other ways to make this deck run, especially in the TCG right now. Use Goblin King to gain a ton of attack, which can be very useful. Junk Warrior is another way you can really get insane attack early on. Junk Warrior with a full Starduston will have 6,000 attack. 1 for 1, a way to search out. Where Arf Thou, another way to search out. Forbidden Lance, another way to protect you from one of the only things that will annoy you when you're using Starduston, so saving yourself from Dark Hole or something like that. Creature Swap, using all these low attack monsters, so that's another alternative. You can run Dustons and Creature Swap. Darkworld Shackles is a way you can kind of keep yourself from taking a lot of damage when you're using House Duston. Ojama Trio, other cards that kind of load your opponent's field, can be useful for locking them down. DNA Surgery, useful for setting your opponents to be fiends, so you can do some of the other things you want to do with this deck. Fuh Rin Ka Zan, if you have all these different elements on the field, you can use this card easily, because all the Dustons, have different elements, so that could be a nice one to really annoy your opponent. Spatial Collapse is a really interesting card, another way to lock down your opponent. Hate Buster, another useful card when you're using fiend monsters. And Final Attack Order is another really annoying thing for your opponent to have to deal with when they have all these Dustons on the field. So that's my Duston deck. Pretty simple to play. It only, has a couple ways to win, but it does them pretty easily. I still think it's pretty fun, but there's really not much to it. It's not one of these, crazy strategy decks. You just really lock down your opponent immediately and just blow them up really quickly. But definitely interesting, and I definitely think this deck can have some potential. But if you guys have your own Duston decks, post below, let me know in the comments. You can make suggestions for me. Maybe there's cards I didn't think about that could be useful for this deck type. I would really like to know, so let me know. But as always, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you later.